All right, what is up? Welcome in the latest episode of GC Live. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark, as always, presented by our guy Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. As always, if you're in the market for a new home, hit up our guy Clint. He's going to walk you through that entire mortgage process, let you know, A, what options you may have, and B, just all the little intricacies that go into that. He's a veteran in that game, is going to make it very, very easy for you. And you can support a Gamecock in the process. Like we always tell you, obviously, not all of you, probably not many of you are searching for a home right now. But if you are, just give Clint a chance to earn your business. Promise you, you won't regret it. As you know, I'm Wes. He is Chris. Day one of spring ball. And first of all, Chris, dude, Chamber of Commerce Day in Columbia, beautiful weather, limited clouds in the sky. I think it's like 70 degrees right now. Couldn't have been a better day for Carolina to kick off their spring practice. And one person told me one time, if you're in this business, never, ever, ever say, we didn't see much. There wasn't much to talk about. Never say those words. So we're not going to say those words. But we were, let's be honest, we were out there for 3 segments, right? So we were taking as much as we could in 3 segments, but most importantly, Gamecocks back in action, plenty of storylines for us to get to, and then some players who actually spoke to the media today as well.
Yeah, I love that too. It's kind of like your don't complain about the weather thing. It's kind of like the don't complain about anything having to do with getting an opportunity to watch sports. We get to write about sports, watch sports, talk about sports for a living. That's pretty good, man. Really. So we need to remember that. I think I need to remember that more often, but it was a gorgeous day. And, walking away from it, you go, ooh, that's it. Just 3 periods. There'll be some practices. I think we get 4 total open practices, Wes, before the spring game. I think there's a few of them in there where we get maybe 6 periods, a couple of them. So we will see a little bit more. Certainly during the spring game, we'll see the most, right, of any of those opportunities. But it's kind of the way I look at it, it's the difference between football or no football. So we now have some football, of course, not the regular season, but in the form of spring practice. And there's always something to see, right? Even I always like to joke before we go in, hey, if you're getting 3 periods, you're probably going to get 2 or 3 periods of snapping and kicking and holding the football. Even that this year has a little intrigue and interest because South Carolina is losing all of those guys, right? So you get to see a little bit of that. And even though it was an abbreviated stay on the practice field for us and the media, the team's still out there. We did get to eyeball, some of these new guys, some freshmen, the transfers, see them for the first time with a helmet on, not in full pads because it's just day one, but always something that I think you can pick up in the course of a practice.
Yeah, no depth chart drill yet. We will hope to maybe get that at some point this spring. But, I look at it like, all right, gather information as much as you can, all winter workouts, then gather as many observations as you can when you get out there. Of course, we'll have our ear to the ground on other things throughout the spring. And then you take what the players themselves are saying and what the coaches are saying, and you just try to add all that up and give as complete of a picture as you possibly can. And the beauty of spring ball, a lot of it is it's about development. And, you can't necessarily know what expectations should be for a team based on what they're going to do playing other teams, playing other opponents. But I do think what the spring is good for is getting an idea of who maybe is winning some of these position battles and who, is still in an ongoing position battle and what's sort of the expectation at spots that are up for grabs. And, Chris, we'll talk special teams, kicker, returners. That definitely is one of the things we at least got a little tiny glimpse of today. But I don't know how much juice there is in that either. I do want to talk because we haven't been on since it was sort of completely made official that Nick Harbor was going to be basically full go this spring.
Yep.
He did confirm our reporting there when he spoke to the media today. Said, "Look, for now, for spring, it's not track for him right now. It's football only. It's all football. It's a focus there." And sitting down with him for one of those Garnet Trust / Gamecock Club interviews, I gotta say, man, he struck me as a kid who has kind of gotten the bug to be great at football. And I think the glimpses we saw last year, the production we saw in the latter half last year, the big plays last year, I think that was just enough for him to say, man, what could my football career be if, like my wide receiver teammates, I'm able to actually go through a spring full of development with an assistant coach who coached wide receivers at the NFL level in Mike Furry.
Yeah, I always go back to this conversation, Wes, of when went up to DC, talked to Nick Carber at school when he was uncommitted. South Carolina was in the mix, but this is before he even took an official visit to South Carolina or anywhere else. He had been to campus before, but this was earlier in the process. And at that time, he kind of divided it when I asked him, what are you looking for in a school? It was 1/3 academics, 1/3 football, 1/3 track, which is for a guy who really wanted to do two sports, that made perfect sense. And Nick's never been a guy that has lacked for confidence, not in a cocky way, but, he has the athletic tools to be confident. He's a very sharp guy. This is someone who's, very much thinking about going to medical school afterwards and would have the chops to be able to do it. And sitting there talking to him, he had a quote that was something like, trying to find a school where he can go be a billionaire, right? And that doesn't mean getting $1 billion of NIL. It means being equipped for the future, right? So this is a guy that has plans and values hard work and has a family that has a lot of athletic and academic and professional successes. So he kind of knows what that looks like. But I think, Wes, like a lot of guys, not to put words in Nick's mouth, and you talked to him recently for that interview reference, it's hard to be really, really elite in two sports at the college level. Now, some guys can do it, but for Nick, who you saw him when he came in, and you've seen, even though he's developed as a wide receiver, there's still a lot more development to do there. Like, there's a lot of meat on the bone. I think he saw, hey, if I want to be great at football, and like he said, I like how you put it, he caught the bug to like, I want to be great at this. He did need to put in even more time. And when he's around the program, he's worked hard, but track takes up a part of that. And so it will be, I think he is one of the most intriguing guys, not just this spring, but this entire year, because can he take that next step with the extra work that he's putting in? And talking to some of his teammates, Wes, they have really noticed it. They've taken note of it.
Yeah, and I think this is a thing where it's hard enough to do two sports, but when spring football is as important as it is and it directly overlaps with track, that makes it even more hard. If it was completely separate, maybe there's a chance there, but it's just really hard to do. And I think for him, he didn't say it maybe exactly like this, but he took notice that, hey, I'm behind these other guys in terms of where I am getting to football basically in the middle of last summer, as opposed to all the other guys in the room are going through spring ball. And so, I think just the opportunity there for immense growth is going to be fun to watch for him. And it would be one thing, in my opinion, I would be saying, hey, guys, I would be saying once again, hey, let's tamp down on the expectations if it wasn't for what we saw the latter half of last year. I think we saw enough the latter half of last year to be saying, look, there is some ability here. Like, other than just the big and fast, like there's a chance for him to be a really productive wide receiver, especially at the college level. And when you add in the size and speed, NFL teams are going to be intrigued by that if he can add that production in there as well. And to go back to my point to start the show, we didn't get to see any offense today, right? Like we aren't out there watching what the offense is doing, but let's add in the little tidbits of information we pick up along the way from winter workouts. Now throw in the fact that his teammates are praising him for the extra work he's put in. Oscar Attaway, who's become I would say, a bit of a team leader this offseason, was talking during his media session just about Nick being in the indoor facility all the time by himself, catching tennis balls, just working on his hand-eye coordination. The fact that Nick has finally bit the bullet and said, look, I need contacts. Like that's something that maybe I fought for a while, but now I need contacts. So point being, I think we've heard enough that I've raised my expectations for this receiving core, not just Nick, but just the receiving core as a whole. I know you had to sit down with Jared Brown. Mazio Bennett, from what we've heard, has taken those steps like you would expect, as hard of a worker as he is. Add in the thought that you're going to get something from these true freshmen. And I think you can feel, if you're a Gamecock fan, much better about this receiving core than you did at this very time last year, when there were quite a few questions about that group.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the old rising tide lifts all ships, right? Because you've got some guys that are back, some guys that still have development they can do, like Jared Brown. He had a couple injuries last year. Nick Harbor, we just spent a lot of time talking about. Mazio Bennett was a true freshman who very much looked ready to play, but Mazio Bennett was not last year what he's going to be this year or next season or the season after. And then you've got an extremely talented freshman class coming in. And from what I've heard, Wes, those freshmen, not just the expectations, but everybody on the team seeing how talented they are, how athletic they are, how they work, that has caused that entire room to step their game up, right? Not that it was, not that was the only reason. Not saying that those other guys weren't working hard, but like there's just something inherent that when there's that much competition in a room, it makes everybody better. So there are still some questions about the group, like who's going to be the leading receiver? What's the rotation look like? Because right now there's more guys than there are spots in terms of who's getting legitimate playing time. How does that all shake out? But it's a different question than going, I don't know if they've really got enough talent in that room. I think they've got some guys. I think you feel much better about that room from a talent standpoint than you have probably the past couple years, just top to bottom. There's still some things to prove, but I think you like the base that they're starting from heading into the spring.
Yeah, and I think you've got to feel good just about what you've seen out of Furry as well. He was a guy. I think you looked at the resume this time last year and you were like, this is an under the radar get for Shane Beamer. But once you learn more and more about him, you're like, okay, this is probably going to work, has a great chance to work. And now I think what we've seen in the last 12 months, you're going, okay, this was a great hire. So I think that probably helps. If you're a positive person, it probably, you're feeling pretty good about that group. And we'll just see what the development. Still questions, I think, like you said, also with the freshmen, who's most ready, who's second most ready. Does that change? Somebody might be most ready right now, but the guy who's third or fourth most ready might just slowly keep improving and then be the best of the freshmen by the time preseason gets here. So I think that's all very fluid, but overall, you just feel like there's enough talent in that room that they're going to be fine, especially with the quarterback coming back like Lenora Sellers. Some of the other, I would say actually the biggest news from today's workout, from today's practice, Chris, was that Vakari Swain was absent. USC spokesman said this was an academic issue and did not necessarily say exactly when he might be back. He is still with the program, like he's expected to be on the team this season, not something long-term in terms of like the 2025 season, as long as he takes care of business. But obviously, man, still noteworthy that someone who was kind of a, a key member of your secondary at corner last year, even if he wasn't a starter. I think you would have had him circled as someone who maybe could move into a much bigger role this year. Now is going to be behind these other guys that are going to be able to go through spring practice.
I love how you said it today, and that is, especially when you look at that, this is expected to be one of the most competitive spots on the team. I feel like a broken record, keep saying that, but there's a lot of spots where there's going to be competition. Corner, you could probably put near the top of the list, I think, just because of some of the guys that they've got in there. And Judge Collier is probably going to hold down one spot. He's already been a starter at points during his 2 years at South Carolina. He probably has the upper hand. And then you've got one other spot, and there's several guys vying for it. And there's several guys vying for platooning, kind of like Judge and Vicari have done in the past at times, right? So to go back to what I was trying to say, I like the way you put it, and that is you can't get that time back. Yes, Vicari probably would have come into the spring if he had been on the field at a number one opposite Judge Collier, because he's been here 2 years. He's played in 16 games. He played in every game last year, and he really seemed to come on, Wes, and get more comfortable as time went on. He had some huge coverage snaps down the field against Clemson, if you remember, in the regular season finale.
One of the best athletes on the team, I think.
A tremendous athlete, and still has a lot more. That's the thing. He's got a lot more development to do. If Vicari Swain were a senior, I wouldn't say no big deal, but he would be more developed. Well, now you're looking at missing potentially a spring. Again, we don't have a firm timeline.
Yeah, we'll see officially what that ends up being.
We'll see what it is, right? But if let's say he misses the whole spring, or even if he just missed a few practices, it's practice time you can't get back. And that's practice time that Jalewis Solomon, Brandon Cisse, Miles Norwood, et cetera, are all, and I left out even a couple guys, they're all out there practicing, getting better. And, you could look up and you're not as far along. You haven't taken the step that you would want to. So certainly disappointing. Now, if you're looking for silver lining, it is what I just mentioned. You did get a couple guys in the portal that you feel like are probably ready to play, plus what you return on the roster.
Well, and Jalewis Solomon, man, here's a 4-star guy that was a huge recruiting win for South Carolina out of high school. I would have anticipated him probably playing more last year than what he ended up doing. So I think probably a pretty big spring for him. I know that's not saying if he doesn't have a good spring that he can't ultimately help you, but we know how fast things move in today's college football world. It's kind of a year-by-year thing. And so now you're in year 2, you're a 4-star guy. There's always there's new guys coming in from the portal. I just think anybody that's in their second year and didn't play as much last year, it's an important spring for you to just keep making progress and start pushing the guy in front of you, because as we know, when teams do not feel good about a position, if you kind of fast forward to next year, they just go portaling, so it's kind of, if you're a high school guy, you want to start to put your foot forward as you go into your second year. And he's certainly, you watch the tape on Jalewis Solomon, man, this kid can play. He was a baller in high school. So I'll be curious, as we put our ear to the ground, so to speak, do we start to hear a little bit more about him? And Garnet Yardbird brings up Brandon Cisse. Cisse is someone who I think we were obviously all high on coming in out of NC State. And I thought it was interesting. Got to speak somewhat briefly with Clayton White at Pro Day yesterday on the radio show. And, Tyler Head, who's our co-host on there, he asked Clayton, and I don't know if Clayton was going to be willing to name names or not. He said, who in winter workouts has kind of just caught y'all's attention? And he's like, other than the obvious, which, is your returning starters, guys like that. He mentioned Devontae Miles at defensive tackle. He said Devontae has already put on some weight, and he expects him to be up into the 280s. And can't remember if he said 290. He was given kind of the goal, his playing weight. Let me see. I've got it right here. Y'all hang tight.
Because he's listed on the roster, I think, at 280 even. And, you look at that and you go, maybe you'd like him to get on a little more weight, right?
Yeah, so Clayton said he's up to probably 275 and will be 285, 290 when we play. So has already started to get bigger, get stronger. And some of those weights, frankly, guys, for the big guys, it can depend on a number of factors any given day that they get weighed. So, but has already put on some good weight. And Devontae was actually the first guy out of his mouth. I don't know if you're reading into that or not, but Devontae has definitely done more than already just in terms of the buzz we've heard than probably was anticipated when you look at wasn't really honestly that highly recruited or that super productive at his prior stop. Wasn't a guy that had the big transfer portal rating on him, but it has come in and turned some heads. He mentioned Gabe Brownlow, didn't he? No surprise, was very impressive. They did a combine this year, like a team combine around the same time as the NFL combine that basically completely mirrored everything Carolina or everything somebody would do if they went to the NFL combine. No surprise if you've looked at any video or photos of Dindy, he measured well. He looks like a high-level SEC defensive lineman is supposed to look when you just see him physically, like he's put together the way you would want him to be. Of course, Clay White mentioned Sean Murphy, Justin Arroquo there at linebacker. But I thought he lit up just a little bit when he talked about Cisse. So he mentioned Cisse, said he's had a great offseason, and then said, and so has Miles Norwood. Quote, it's been a good group, man. I thought we went after what we needed, talking about the portal. So I think there's already some confidence that maybe you have filled some of those roles adequately in some of the portal guys. Clayton White obviously only talking about defensive guys because that's his side of the ball. But interesting that the people he talked about in terms of just feeling like they have filled some holes there.
The thing that stood out to me listening to that and then hearing you kind of read it back, it just reiterates it feels like, again, that was a day before spring ball, so the pads haven't come on. Like we got to see. But initial impressions for the staff is that there's a very high, they think, hit rate on deep. We're talking about just defense, right? But it seems like they've hit. And Wes, if you think about like early in the transfer portal era, I think South Carolina and other teams, you're trying to figure it out, right? It's very condensed. It's very new. In a lot of instances, you're going, ooh, transfer portal, we can fill a hole, and it's kind of rushed. You don't really know what's going on very early. The hit rates maybe aren't as high. Well, one of the reasons South Carolina was able to have so much success last year, they retained a lot of talent. They brought in talent from the portal, and they had a high hit rate. They went out and got guys who fit, who could play. Demetrius Knight, right? Maybe the best example. We've got a lot more to learn. We got to get through spring ball. Do these returns continue? Does somebody hit a wall? Does everybody stay healthy? I mean, there are questions, right? That has to be the caveat. But it seems like they've really liked, or maybe even loved, what they've seen from some guys that they've frankly been expecting a lot from. And then you've even got maybe I would say a surprise in Devontae Miles where he's already more advanced than maybe you thought he would be. That's a good base to have going in to spring ball where you feel like you've hit on some of the needs and what you went after.
Yeah, and I think for them, they're also, talking to Clayton White, there was an acceptance already of, look, this is going to be a different group. They're going to have to be patient. They're going to have to let some of these guys come along at their own pace. But I thought it was interesting, too. He said, look, the standard does not change. And I think, reading between the lines, I think he was more kind of just – I think he was talking about his room. Typically, if you ask him about guys, he kind of focuses a little bit more on the linebackers because that is his group as opposed to the entire defense. But you look at what they lost at linebacker, there's going to be a lot of high expectations on guys to step into bigger roles, whether they're newcomers or whether you're a J.R. Johnson or a Jaron Willis who are, coming back but are going to be in much different roles than you were in last year. And he said, look, yeah, those guys were great. We're going to miss them, but the standard has been set. He even said the standard may be higher now. That, I thought if you want to like really start to parse quotes and read into things, adding that on, like, hey, the standard has been set and the standard may be higher is kind of interesting. And so I think they will be patient with that group, but that was their exact message to them. He said their message on Tuesday for today's practice was, one, go fly around and have fun. Don't be overthinking. It's an easy install day one. Go show who you are as a football player. But two, just because those other guys are gone does not mean our standard for that position changes. The standard is what it is, or the standard even goes up, which I thought was kind of a fascinating thing to say, knowing it is pretty much a brand new room in terms of their roles and what they're going to be this year.
Yeah, and I think that fits in neatly with Shane Beamer's kind of theme for this season that he's told us about. And he told us about it in February, and it was, taking the team farther. Are you getting a weird noise, by the way, Wes? Oh, there we go. I was getting a little feedback. Let us know in the comments if you hear it. But Beamer was talking about taking this team farther, right? Obviously, some great things accomplished last season, but not resting on that, not just knowing that it's not going to happen automatically. You don't just show up, roll the ball out. Hey, we're here. We won 9 games last year. Everything will be the same. We'll probably win 9 games or more this year, right? If you want to do that, that's a great goal, but it's going to be really, really hard to get there. And I think he and Clayton White, I'm sure Joe DeCamillis, I'm sure Mike Shula on their respective sides of the ball are really trying to instill that mindset that, yeah, we want to go farther, but in order to do that, there does have to be a standard. And it's going to be, frankly, Wes, some of those guys are going to be extremely hard to replace. There's no doubt. So there's a lot of work to do this spring, summer, and into the preseason.
Yeah, for sure. All right, before we get any further, let's talk about some of our great sponsors. First of all, our guy, Andy Luedecke, My Perfect Franchise, over at myperfectfranchise.net. Hit up Andy today, 404-973-9901, or you can shoot him an email, andy@myperfectfranchise.net. We've told you about Andy several times, but basically what My Perfect Franchise is going to do is it's going to help you experience, but with a helping hand along the way, what business ownership can be. So whether you've been wanting to franchise and see it more like a side gig, or whether you're just wanting to go all in on owning your own business, what Andy's going to do, he's going to take all your information. He's going to sort of get an idea of what things intrigue you, how much money you have to put forward, how much time you have to put forward, and then he's going to help you link up with a franchise that he believes would make sense for both you and for them. And then 2 very important things. One of them, no cost to you, because franchises actually will pay finder's fees in order to find great people to work with. And then 2, he's going to help you every single step of the way. So once he matches it, he's going to help you with all those meetings, help you get started. And just, of course, everybody, if he's matching with someone, he wants to see it go well too. So he's going to help you every step of the way there. So if that sounds like something you wanted to take the leap on, hit up Andy today, 404-973-9901.
We're going to tell people about another sponsor, Wes. Let's do it. Palmetto Golfing. Our guy, Brandon, shout out to him. Palmetto Golfing belts. You can get there by going to palmettogolfing.com. That'll take you straight to his store. And so let me take this down for just a second. I'll put it back up, but check out some of these products. Wes, needlepoint belts. Very, very well made. A lot more affordable than some of the brands that of needlepoint belts that you may see out there. Got the Palmetto tree going on. Got the South Carolina colors rocking. Brandon has golf belts. He now has golf gloves in his store. So golf season kicking up. Got a couple different types of these guys. These are packaged extremely well. They are awesome. Palmetto tree going on there as well. Had it upside down. There you go. He's also got custom branded golf tees. You can get the Palmetto tree on those or a cross, and golf towels as well. So the top seller, Wes, of the needlepoint belt has actually been the one with the cross on it. A lot of people loving that. People from around the country ordering that thing. So if you're curious as to what Brandon has, you don't have to be a golfer, right? Wes, you know, I'm not much of a golfer. I would like to be a good golfer, and Brandon's really good, so maybe he'll teach me one of these days and help me get better. You can actually just check out these needlepoint belts. You can wear them out and about, work, casual. They're great for church. But if you're a golfer, you can enjoy those, but also the golf gloves, golf tees, golf towels, great made stuff. A South Carolina fan, a local company who has a store, PalmettoGolfing.com. Go check it out. Support our guy, Brandon. Get yourself some great stuff.
Let's go ahead and knock this one out too there, Chris. For those who are going to the South Carolina women's basketball game on Friday, come by, see us in the Vista, the new Still Hands Vista Distilling and Brewing location. And they actually, we've been by, twice already. Fantastic new location right in the heart of the Vista. They do their own spirits there, but they are hosting watch parties for every single South Carolina women's basketball game during the postseason. And again, we will be doing a special broadcast from there, 2:00 on Friday. Chris looks confused right now. I'm trying to figure out why, but now he's leaving us. But watch party, again, Still Hands Vista. We may have a special guest. We're trying to get Markeisha Grant, former Gamecock guard, who has been out, who has helped Gamecock Central with lots of content analyzing South Carolina women's basketball during the postseason last year, and then about maybe halfway through this season, and then through the postseason this year. Markeisha has been sharing her insights with us on GamecockCentral.com. I believe, I'm hoping, she said she thought she would be able to make it work. I think she's going to be able to swing by and come see us in person before that game, which is at 4:00 on Friday. But Still Hands Vista wanted to let everyone know they will be hosting watch parties for the South Carolina women's basketball games throughout the postseason. As long as that run goes, we, everybody around here, of course, is hoping that it's another Final Four and national championship run. They'll be having those games on in the Vista. Great spot to go before you walk on over to the game. So, all right, y'all, that's our reads for today. Let's get back to football. And I mentioned it earlier, Chris, one of the more, I don't know if it's one of the more interesting, but still low-key important battles is that South Carolina does not have a letterman in the specialist group. Like they do not have someone who has earned a varsity letter. Even though you don't talk about it, the school still does that. Hey, it was a varsity letterman from last year. I feel like that's a very old school thing or a very high school thing. But I was looking at South Carolina's official preview from the for the spring, and it said, look, there are no returning lettermen in the major specialist roles, which, that's why you bring in a Joe D. Camillus to run your special teams. Our guy, and I love Joe D., but he's going to have a busy spring and a busy preseason, frankly.
Yeah, he is. And I'll be frank, Wes, when we sat down with Beamer, he used 2 words, and we were fully on the record. He said scary. It's scary, but also said exciting. Scary, but exciting, right? Because you're getting an opportunity to see, a Mason Love, right? Mason Love brought in as a punter, highly thought of, highly ranked punter, also drawing a look, at least right now, as a potential place kicker. And that's not square peg, round hole. A lot of guys do both in high school. Mason Love did both in high school. He did it really well. I think it was 16 of 20 his last year, broke his school record 2 or 3 times, hit a 55-yarder, hit a 57-yarder. He's got range. And caught my attention yesterday, Wes, Kai Kroger at Pro Day said, hey, Mason Love's already better as a freshman than I was as a freshman. So now if you Kai's just a nice guy. Okay. But That'll catch your attention a little bit. Kai Kroger, pretty good, and he was pretty good early as well. So, Mason Love, he is expected to be in there. Max Kelly, who was their scholarship kicker signee, will not be on campus till the summer. You've got Kyler Farrow, who's a scholarship long snapper. He'll be in the mix, but some walk-ons will too, right? And so you're losing literally kicker, snapper, holder, and punter all in one, plus a bunch of veteran guys who also played on special teams in coverage, returning. Like, you're losing a lot. And so it's just a question that's going to have to be answered throughout the spring.
Yeah, losing Juju McDowell did a fine job as your punt returner and kickoff returner last year. And you look at, Delvon Campbell running that 4.43. He was a guy, ran 4.43 early this week in Pro Day. How many times, if you really paid attention, could you look up on punt coverage, I should say, and see Delvon Campbell flying down the field to go hit somebody as a gunner? And so, I think that's something. Remember, I feel like Pete Limbo is the person who really kind of brought this to my attention for the first time, to where I started paying attention to it. We never think of gunners as being a highly important position, but he said the gunner spot, hopefully I'm remembering this correctly, was one of his non-negotiables. And that is sort of, every position is important, but there are, frankly, certain positions where maybe you can just fill a guy in and say, hey, go play a role. Gunner, it takes a certain type of player, a certain type of athlete to run down there and hit people and set the tone for your coverage. And, Delvon, even when he wasn't making plays on offense for a pretty big portion of the year, he was still running down there and making plays on special teams. So who can you get in a position to go down there and do that and do it well? I think you can find those guys on this roster, but still is another spot that is sort of in transition. The returner spot, I think you've got some really good options, frankly. I think there's some athletes that can make people miss and catch the football for you. But one thing I noticed last year, Joe D, he reps a lot of guys at punt return and kick return. So, does a Kilgore have an early advantage just because we know he has caught punts in games before? Or does one of the freshmen come in here? I mean, you look at like a Brian Rowe, he has the build of a lot of really good punt returners. So I think there's a lot of guys that could, Vakari Swain, as we talked about earlier, was not at practice today, academic issue. He, to me, would have been someone I would maybe circled for punt return. Obviously, at this exact moment, that would not be possible.
Yeah, I mean, Kilgore, that caught my attention that he was not surprised, right? But he was out there, as one of the guys working. You had some young guys. You would probably give Kilgore the advantage on punt return, because not only is he a roster returner, he's literally done it in games and proven himself very reliable. And I do think, Wes, a guy like Joe D, he's obviously coached young players, whether it's rookies in the NFL or first-year guys in special teams at the college level. But as a special teams coach, when you're thinking about returning, when you're thinking about getting the job done, you're going to want reliability, and athleticism is a huge part of that. South Carolina's got a bunch of athletic guys, including a bunch of young guys, but above all, you're going to want guys that you can really count on. So who can prove that they have that combination of athleticism plus a trust factor for the staff? You think about punt returning, probably one of the hardest jobs in football, right? So Jalen Kilgore, do you give him the edge going in because of that? Maybe so. You got Nick Harbor. He was talking about that today. He confirmed he's going to be getting a look again at kick return. He's done a little of that in a game scenario. So there are, at the same time, some very interesting guys that could potentially be plugged in as returners that I think we would love to see, just to see what it would look like, get a look at it. But that's just part of it, right? You've also got the gunners, like you said, the coverage guys, the guys blocking, who's shield, right? There's a lot, and a lot of moving parts and pieces that they're going to be trying to figure out.
That is one thing Nick said too. He would love a shot to be like the kickoff returner. So that's been one of my I don't know, just to see a 6'5" guy have a kickoff return for touchdown in a college football game would be pretty amazing. So we'll see if that ever actually comes to fruition. But certainly, I think would have to be an option there among, frankly, a lot of options. I think several guys on this. As you get better and better and bring in athletes in the secondary and at wide receiver, typically those are your guys that are going to be your returners as well, it seems like. So we'll see where that goes moving forward. Let's see. I'm trying to think if we're missing anything. Oh, so day one is what I call kind of an off the hoof day. Who grabs your attention? Who's bigger than you thought? Who's smaller than you thought? Who had a huge off season? Doesn't always mean everything, but I think fans do still like to hear about the newcomers who kind of jumped out. At least we're literally talking eyeball test, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you, man, Quay died. No idea how far along he is as a player. Well, looking forward to finding out and seeing. But I saw 22 Garnet, and Garnet was defense today, and I was going, okay, my brain immediately goes Bam Martin Scott, right? Like that's who I've got it saved as, even though I know Bam is not out there. And I'm going, all right, who's the new 22? It didn't ring a bell with me. But my thought, without having any idea of who it was immediately, was, dude, that's just a big kid. Like he's just put together, tall, long, like the long arms. And I hit up my trusty guide that Steve Fink gave us, Quay Dodd. So, freshman who looks like you would hope a freshman 4-star edge looks. Ben DeRocha mentions Russell Faison. Faison is huge. He is definitely more well put together than you would have anticipated if you were just looking at some of his listed weights coming out of the transfer portal.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about, hey, the listed weight even in your official college bio, he's bigger than the one that South Carolina has out already. What is he listed at on there, Wes? I'm going to do some real-time Googling here for Faison. 218. Yeah, bigger than that. I mean, he's about 225 right now from what he told us just a few days ago. So I remember some of the weights when he was on the radar and even after he committed, there were some weights that were like, I don't know, what was it, 180, 190, something like that going around. And you're going, oh, okay, smaller back. No, I mean, I remember hearing from some people when he got on campus that kid's big, like a lot bigger. And so he's extremely well put together where you're just sitting beside him at a table like we were at the Transfer Media Day a few days ago, or you're seeing him, with his jersey, shorts, and the helmet on. Like he's a put together guy. So very excited to see him. Really excited, Wes, to see all the backs, right? I mean, with Faison and Oscar Attaway, Carolina has maybe I'm seriously not trying to be funny, one of the oldest, maybe I should say one of the most experienced running back rooms. Yes. That's how you and I are going to start classifying ourselves. We're experienced, not old.
As I see this gray spot get bigger and bigger.
It's just a sign of experience.
Experience.
Yeah. It's like the stripes and logos they put on the helmets when you earn them. But you've got experience with him and Attaway. Faison, like, he's just such a fascinating player because he had 1,100 yards, but he's not really like a quote unquote big play back. Like lots of chunks, lots of big chunks, chain mover. So very interested to see him. You got the younger guys. I mean, Jawarn Howell's now in his third year of college, second year here. So maybe not young, but young for South Carolina. And then Matt Fuller is a redshirt freshman. That's a really cool group, I think, that I'm very interested to see.
Yeah, Steven says Wendell Gregory, edge or linebacker this year. Still listed as an edge on the roster they gave us. Haven't heard anything at all. I actually asked somebody about linebacker last week, kind of who I was in the mix. Gregory is not mentioned, so I'm going to assume for now, Steven, still at edge. We'll see what happens there if he can start to make a dent there. Obviously, a super highly recruited guy at a high school. So again, maybe put him in that category too. Not that there's pressure, but important spring for him. I think for us start to hear a little bit more, about him. And it is kind of fascinating, man, if you think about what you were just saying about the running backs and Jawarn Howell, third year in college, and he's a younger guy for the room. And then you look at the quarterback room, and you're like, if you're in your third year in college, you're the old man in the group at quarterback.
Yeah.
And you got obviously Aaron Nolan comes in as a transfer, but it's only a redshirt freshman. You got Dante Reno as a redshirt freshman. You've got Cutter Woods, who we've heard honestly quite a bit of buzz about. The staff has been excited about him through his first kind of 2-3 months on campus, and did notice. I mean, he's pretty well put together as well out there for a true freshman. And Chris, interesting note that we picked up on too is maybe a little bit more Luke Doty in the quarterback room than there was last year. He was out there today in the green QB jersey, was warming up, was stretching with the quarterback group, but then was also involved with some special team stuff, which is kind of what we anticipated. And again, he's still listed as an athlete. He's always kind of done a little bit of everything, at least the last couple of years. But from what I've heard, has spent more time as of late in that quarterback room than he did last year when he was really focused on helping out at wide receiver. So does that get you another veteran into the room who can be really important for those guys to learn everything, to be a great helping hand? And frankly, depending on how some guys, make their progress, I don't hear people talking about this yet, but could Doty be in the mix to be your backup quarterback? I think. I mean, it's got through for 1,500 yards. Like it's not like he can't play.
Yeah, and he's played. Which you look at some of the other options. I mean, Cutter Woods has not played. Dante Reno has not played. Aaron Nolan has not played, right? And so, with Doty in the mix, it's probably a question that has to be asked. If you, game one, Lenoris, LSU, you turn your ankle, who's going in? And that's an open question. I think it's a question we've been probably classifying it as, is it Aaron Nolan or somebody else? But with Doty in the mix, as a coach, that's something you got to think about. Hey, I've got this guy who's actually played before, who's been around for, year 6, right? It's interesting. And from that standpoint, when you think about it, makes sense if you're going, well, why, right? You've added some pieces to that receiver room. Doty's been in the quarterback room before and still contributed on special teams or worked at special teams. So where can you plug him in where he's going to be most helpful to you? And Shane Beamer, singled out Doty to us last month as someone that he's looking to be more of a leader on the team. He doesn't necessarily have to go be a starter or go play a ton in order to do that. It's just about helping show the guys the ropes and being where you're most valuable.
Yeah, for sure. The other note we were looking for going into practice, didn't get to actually see it with our own eyes, but have found out Tree Babalade going to play some guard, which I think we sort of anticipated maybe would or should be a possibility. He's worked at some guard and tackle in the days where they kind of do their walkthrough stuff leading up to spring ball. And, based on that potential, based on what I've heard about Trey Ball having a really, really good offseason and taking another step forward, and then based on what we've heard about the 3 transfers, that trio, with the huge caveat, winter workouts does not equal real football. You still got to go earn it. You still got to go compete. But lots of buzz about what Boaz Stanley has come in and shown in the kind of weight program, just meeting those standards they're looking for in terms of size, speed, IQ, work ethic, ability to kind of move. These guys have done it so long, they can kind of tell, all right, who has the characteristics you're looking for physically at a particular position. And that's where you start to hear maybe excitement about a newcomer. And so I think, dude, I've heard enough to know there's some excitement about Boaz Stanley in the football program right now as well. So I think you have, similar to wide receiver, got an interesting battle, particularly on the interior of the offensive line. But I also feel like I like the pieces they have there. I actually think there's maybe more upside in the interior than there was last offseason.
I feel like there's like more potential, more depth, maybe. I mean, last year Carolina brought in, you had some options on the interior, like some young talent. I mean, Tro was a part of it, right? Marquis Anderson has been a guy that I think probably fair to say has never been for an extended period of time, like 100% healthy. You had Rashawn Lee back, and then you brought in the 2 transfers in Kamar Bell and TS3, who ended up winning those 2 jobs. You've now brought in 3 interior guys who can play center or guard for you. But those other guys are like a year older, So I feel like you do have more depth and probably, like you said, more upside. So I don't know. The more I keep saying that every position we get to, I'm like, this will be one of the most competitive spots. But like, seriously, you think about interior offensive line, tackle, you feel like Thompson, Henry, very, very likely. Center and the 2 guard spots, probably big time competition. I imagine, West, a lot of rotating those ones, especially in the early part of spring.
Yeah, Ben said, had someone tell me Newsome could factor in at center. Yeah, that's something. I don't know when we reported that, but yeah, we've reported Newsome has taken. Again, you're talking about kind of those walkthrough type reps that aren't real spring ball leading up till today, but Newsome has taken some reps there. Nick Sharp has actually gotten some center reps too. So, as always, it's going to be about what gets your best 5 on the field, and then what, if you kind of dial it into the interior spot, what gets your best 3 on the field. Can Tree, and does Tree compete at right tackle? I don't know. He's kind of been a left tackle, it seems like, throughout his time at South Carolina. But I think when you look at Tree, he's big enough, man. He can move people where I think he could maybe fit into that guard at one of those guard spots as well. He's kind of, I would say, the wild card or the X factor on the interior, in terms of how it's going to play out and who takes what spot. And then it becomes, all right, if these are my 5, who's next man up if there are some injuries? And I credit to those guys the way they've recruited on the offensive line, because Carolina's maybe one of the few places where you do feel you have some depth at tackle. I mean, you look at Jatavius over there at right tackle. You look at Tree and his ability to step right in and play left tackle. And, that's hard to build in today's college football world. So credit to them for that. All right, let's close this thing out, man. Chris, any closing thoughts on spring ball so far, day 1, that we have not hit on?
I think we covered maybe not everything, Wes, but enough for today. I mean, today was more about eyeballing some guys, like you said. So just kind of putting eyeballs on some of the newcomers, seeing what we could see. There'll be more to come, throughout the spring. I think 3 more open practices for us. We'll hear some things behind the scenes that will certainly be passing along, and then all of it building up to the spring game, which is now less than a month away. Not going to be on TV, by the way. So go ahead and plan. Probably more of an incentive. Come on out to Williams-Brice. We're not like advertising for it, but heck, you should come out. You should come out to Williams-Brice. Wes and I'll be there. Probably up high somewhere, but we'll wave at you. Come on.
Indeed, come see us and come see the South Carolina football team. That, as Chris said, less than a month away on a Friday night this time. I guess for the first time ever, certainly for the first time in the modern era of Gamecock football. Once again, shout out to our guy Clint Hammond, CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Appreciate y'all, as always, for tuning in. As always, like, review, subscribe, hit all the buttons. He is Chris. I'm Wes, and we'll see you soon.